Welcome back. I'm Jay Haig, Executive Director of a nonprofit called Living Without Lust. We help men who struggle with lust and support the Christian leaders who serve them. This is a 10-part series for leaders on how to best equip yourselves to be resource people and to help those who struggle with lust, pornography, and other issues in your congregations or in your ministries. And by the way, if you want to correspond with us, you have suggestions, you have questions, you can email me at j@livingwithoutlust.com. You can also go to our website, livingwithoutlust.com, and there are all kinds of resources, videos, etc. for you to help you to become a better resource person in helping those who struggle with these issues. As you may remember, in our first video in this leadership training series, we talked about the disconnect between the numbers of people who are struggling in the average organization, which is most reliably between about 30 to 50% of the men, and increasingly, particularly among the younger women, 18 to 31 women as well, who struggle with this, and yet very few will come forward to talk about it with you as their leader. Why is this? We said that primarily the congregants or the people in your ministry will tailor their questions to the things that they believe you think are important. So if you never mention this struggle in any way in your preaching, in your teaching, in your organizational activities, etc., they are going to tend to not talk to you about it. So it's very important to talk about this whole issue. So today, in our second session, I want to talk about how to create an open and helping atmosphere in your congregation, your churches, your Christian organization, or whatever you may be leading. So the first thing, I'm going to mention 5 things that you could do to create an open atmosphere where people can talk about these issues, because the more they talk about them, the more they will begin to unearth the problem, seek solutions, and the more you can help them. So the first thing you can do, remember I said last time that every 6 months to stand up and say, if you're struggling with this, please come and talk to me. But I would pepper your public comments from time to time. And again, you're going to be leading and speaking about a lot of different issues, and we don't expect you to spend all of your time or even most of your time talking about this. But we do recommend that from time to time you pepper your illustrations, the topics, your announcements, etc. with this problem, because it is so widespread. I call it the desolating sacrilege set up where it ought not to be. We are always a couple of clicks away from being into lust-generated material. So it is very pervasive. So instead of just throwing it in a list of sins in your sermons, speak about it. Begin to talk the language that the problem and the solution, and we certainly can help with that in your public comments. And as you do this, people will begin to sense your openness, they'll begin to relate, etc. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would do is I would offer small group opportunities, and again, this is tailored to your particular culture. You know what is best for your people and how to introduce this, but we recommend that congregations begin to talk about sexual brokenness as the norm. I'll give you some suggestions today. Redeem Sexuality by Andrew Boa. He started this when he was a student at Wheaton College and had 150 students involved in small groups. And he came up with this 12-week, expandable to 24-week series called Redeem Sexuality. It is private, it's meant to be done men with men, women with women, and it begins to help people to talk about the sexual brokenness that is the reality. So I would open up your congregation to some alternatives for small groups to be people begin to talk about these kinds of issues in their lives. That's the second thing. And again, you know the culture, you know how best to handle it, whether it's on a retreat, whether it's as a small group in the church, or whatever. You can also expose people to resources of others that are sharing their struggle. There are 2 movies that we recommend. One is a documentary and the other is kind of a parable. The first one is called The Heart of the Matter. This is Christians struggling with pornography. This is something you can get from Amazon.com. You can show it in your church or your organization. It's Christians of all ages, backgrounds, races, sexes, talking about their struggles with pornography and lust. It opens up the conversation. Again, this is for a congregation that's willing to engage with this subject, and we recommend that. The other one is called The Heart of Man, and that is also available from Amazon, and that is a parable of the prodigal son set to the issue of sexual brokenness. Very powerful, and we would recommend either of those as a community event or an event where you would ask people to participate, and then you can have a Q&A, sharing afterwards, etc. So, in general, I would begin to load up your book table, or at least have an alternative for maybe a book of the month where you would take that book and put it on the book table that would deal with this subject. The third thing I might do is to create an open atmosphere in the church or in your organization, is to invite a Christian therapist, maybe somebody who's a certified sex addiction therapist, or somebody who has a Christian approach to their practice to come and speak about this issue. You could also find somebody who's a leader in the sexual addiction recovery community in your area. If you ask other pastors or other leaders, they probably would know somebody who would come to speak on the subject, again, to open it up. That takes the pressure off you because you're bringing the person in. They're on the front lines, they're dealing with people struggling with this issue, and they can give you some real perspective. And the last thing, so we've covered mentioning it openly in your public announcements and in your preaching and teaching. We talked about small groups, we talked about inviting a therapist, and we've talked about the book table and the resource table in your church. The last thing is to make a commitment as a major part of your preaching and teaching to come to terms with the gospel solution to the struggle of lust. There are many books you can read. There's one we recommend called Impossible Joy. You can get that at royk.com. It's a real delving into the humanity of Jesus, and from a lust perspective, very powerful. I've also written a book on the subject called The Rest of God. It's an exposition on the Epistle to the Hebrews, which shows how the gospel relates to this. It's very important that we understand that the lust desire is a desire for connection, for deep connection that has been hijacked and distorted. If we can understand that, rather than kind of a moralistic approach that somebody needs to read their Bible and study more and repent, do all these commandments that often exert the will, and the will is powerless over lust. Instead, we need to focus on the connection that people desire to have with God and with others that's honest, that's deep, that's redeeming. The Rest of God are recommended. It's from Amazon.com. And there are other books that you could read that would help you to begin to apply the gospel to this whole setting. So all of these things taken together, mentioning it often in your preaching and teaching, having gateway groups that will study a book like Redeemed Sexuality, inviting a therapist, having your book table and resource table peppered with these kinds of resources, the movies, The Heart of Man and The Heart of the Matter, and then preaching the gospel and studying how it relates to this area will open up this subject, and you'll begin to see that people who are struggling privately will come forward, and they will find that you are the one who's to get them help. Remember that we always stand behind you. We have all the resources. We have a resource packet we can send to you either electronically or whatever, however you want to get it, that shows you how to become a resource person in this area. The more you can become that resource person, the more your door will be open to those that struggle. The more people will find help and hope, and their lives will be changed. So until next time, again, Jay Haig, Executive Director of Living Without Lust. Have a great day.